Welcome back to another episode of the Landlord Chick podcast. And today is part 2 on ways to get ready for the next pandemic or economic shudder that affects our industry. So, this is a part 2 episode, which means there was part 1. If you haven't listened to part 1, pause this one, go and listen to that one, and then come back because we're going to build on some of the conversations we've had in the first episode. All right, so we've talked about reserves, we've talked about tenant rapport. Now let's talk about how do we help our tenants when times are tough? You need to have a tenant resource packet. I'm hoping that you already have at least a very basic list of assistance available to tenants that are struggling. And likely you have right now, if you do have one, it's likely what I call a selfish assistance list. A selfish assistance list is one which only offers information on how to get your bill, the rent paid, and it doesn't give the tenant any availability of other resources that may help them with other things. Now, don't forget that if you give them ideas for assistance with other expenses, it can make it easier for them to pay the rent bill. Plus, it shows that you care about them and are not just looking to get your own needs met. So we have a tenant resource packet that we do hand out, and we modified it for COVID-19. And I'm going to go into this in a little bit, but with our packet, when we sent it out, I was genuinely surprised at the responses we got. We got positive feedback from our tenants because we put a lot of thought into this packet. We didn't just include rental assistance, we included other things. And we also included up to date information on the different areas that were being affected by COVID 19. So we had information on student loan payments. We had information regarding what some of the credit card companies were doing. We had the up to date information on the tax deadline being extended. This was all stuff we had included in our tenant resource packet that we sent out to anyone that contacted us in need of assistance during COVID 19. Now, if you remember to last week's episode, I talked about how we had a very high rent collection during COVID 19. And I attributed that to our tenant rapport. Having this tenant resource pack built on our tenant rapport, it made a huge difference to our tenants because it showed that we weren't only just looking to get our bill paid, but that we genuinely wanted to be of help to them. So, beyond having rental assistance in your tenant resource packet, what else should you include in there? Well, food assistance, so food pantries. Look up local food pantries that exist in your area. You likely have the one big one, which is run by maybe a municipality, or maybe even it's a large organization across the nation that runs your local food pantry. But then also don't forget that there's many food pantries that are run by small independent charities, and that also churches and other places of worships also run their own food pantries as well sometimes. So include those in your packet. Also include information you have on utility assistance. Do a quick Google search for your state and energy assistance. See what pops up. Most states have some sort of energy assistance program where eligibility is based on a household's position in a percentage of the poverty level. And some states actually did open up these utility assistance programs in the midst of COVID 19. So it would be a really important link to have in there. And lastly, I encourage you to have a page that is dedicated to COVID 19 resources. Now, we talked about this kind of briefly, but there might be a second wave of this hitting our country like late November to January. So I think it's really important to have an outline in your tenant resources packet for COVID 19 resources. So specifically, we're looking at charitable funds that were established and used. So if I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, I know United Way had a fund that was available. I believe Salvation Army had another one that was set up. So just on one piece of paper in your packet, just type out quickly the charities and then the organization's website that had COVID 19 assistance. That way, if round 2 does hit, You can easily Google to see if these charities are still doing a fund for COVID-19 assistance. Now, it likely won't make sense to track or list assistance that was available at the state level because those will likely have significant changes, including names, funding, availability of funds. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to just have a reminder on that page to search for those when the time comes. Now, because we just talked about COVID-19 resources, you maybe want to have two packets. So create your packet with the rental assistance, the food assistance, utility assistance, and then basically do a save as with that document and create a second one, which is COVID-19 specific. And then you can put that last page in there with the COVID-19 resources. This way, you'll have a general resource packet ready to go that can be used regardless of what's going on. And then you can also have that specific one for COVID-19 that if you do have round two, you'll have the resources available that were more COVID-19 specific. All right, so start building your tenant resource packet. That's a quick thing you can start doing. Honestly, it takes about 30-35 minutes to get it together. And one key thing you want to do in there is make sure you have links in there to websites where they can get more information. So even if it's just linking to the front page of whatever resource exists there on the internet, be sure and have that link in there. That was one of the feedback that we got with our packet was how great it was that the tenants could just click on the link and go directly to the page to learn more about it. So rather than putting phone numbers in there or not even having a web address in there, tenants give us a lot of positive feedback about that. And if you're not crazy about having long web addresses in your packet, don't forget that services like Bitly exist, bit.ly, where you can shorten any link and it's all for free. The next thing you want to consider doing is start working on long term renewal incentives. Now, this is something you want to get started on as soon as possible. If you have vacancies coming up, incentives tend to be a reason that people choose to stay longer, other than you treating them well and having a good competitive rent rate. Many people seal the deal with staying for long term by getting an incentive like this. And the sooner you have it in place, the sooner you can kind of reap the benefits of having a long term lease renewal locked in heading into the next round of the pandemic. Now, of course, I have to tell you to consult your state laws for what you can and cannot do for a rent incentive or any sort of incentive for renewal. But I do have a few ideas for you. So, my first idea, when anyone renews a lease for 6 months or a year, give them a useful gift card like groceries. Now, it has to be of a considerable amount, especially in regards to rent. So, I like to say your ideal amount should be somewhere between $75 and $150, and make it a useful gift card like groceries. I know you might be tempted to get them something to like a pizza place or some other restaurant, but especially when we're talking about a pandemic, a $75 grocery card is much more useful to a tenant than a $70 pizza gift card because the pizza gift card is going to get them maybe three meals depending on the size of their family, versus at the grocery store, $75 could get them 12 meals. So I urge you to go more on the practical side, get them a grocery gift card, something like that. Idea number two, and this is something I got from another investor who I think he's rather smart for doing this. When a tenant renews for 6 months or a year, he gives them a household essentials basket. And again, the basket total is a fairly considerable value. He does it for between $50 and $75. And in this household essentials basket, he has items like laundry detergent, fabric softener sheets. If he has dishwashers in the unit that he's giving this to, he'll include like a dishwasher deliming packet. And he'll also include like a couple tablets of Cascade. But then, even more awesome, is he includes things like degreaser, bathroom cleaner, a new toilet brush, because he knows that if tenants have these items on hand and they work really well, like you get good quality products, they're more likely to clean and keep up with his unit. So he buys all these things, he puts them together in a nice basket, and he drops it off at their unit. And again, he makes it for a fairly considerable amount of money, usually somewhere between $50 and $75. So that's another great way to do a renewal incentive. And it's also a nice little thank you gift for them as well for renewing. Now, these are something you want to tell them that they're going to get if they renew. It doesn't make much sense to have this in place, but then not tell them that the incentive exists. So on your renewal form, be sure and have in there that if they renew for 6 months or a year, they're going to get whatever incentive you pick. Now, I encourage you to pick the one thing you want to give and don't necessarily give them the option. So if you want to give the gift cards, tell them they're going to get a gift card. And also make sure that you are giving the same amount of gift card to every tenant, regardless of whether they renew for a year or 6 months. I feel like giving a tenant a little bit more money on their gift card because they renewed for a year rather than 6 months might be a fair housing concern. So it's just better to stick to one amount for every gift card that you hand out. Now, I know you may be wondering, why should I be encouraging people to lock into leases when payments will be uncertain? Because one of the first things that many states did was they shut down their evictions and they took away the ability for landlords to give notices. So if we can't give them notice and we can't get rid of them, does it make much sense for them to be able to easily get rid of us during that time frame? Why get caught off guard with 6 move-out notices in February or right after the pandemic hits, or maybe even have someone move right before it hits? It just makes sense. Get people locked into leases that are going to be there long term. And hey, if it doesn't work out, then sure, as soon as the evictions can be filed in your state, I guess go ahead and file. But at least you'll have given it a shot at trying to avoid any sort of mass exodus that may occur after the pandemic lightens or even after winter occurs. All right, next item. And this one is more on the personal level for all of us. Get your shit together. Don't forget that it's really important to have your own stuff together because it makes it easier than when the entire world is upside down. So, in this last episode, were you caught off guard by the toilet paper shortage? You maybe weren't like my brother who has an Amazon subscription and was just sort of always getting toilet paper delivered, never really paying attention to how much you had. And you go down in your basement and you realize you have like 12 packs of toilet paper. You may have been someone who was like, oh, I only have like an extra 3 rolls. And then you were scrambling to find toilet paper because everyone was buying it up. Or maybe your only pair of jeans ripped like the Continental Divide 3 weeks into quarantine. Yes, I am raising my hand right now. That is my true story. So start getting your bases covered. Start stocking up within reason, not hoarding, and making sure you have backups of various things. If you went through the first COVID-19 pandemic wishing you had a deep chest freezer, one of those ones where you can store a lot of food in it and it's like an upright chest opening, start looking into getting that deep freezer chest. If you didn't have enough room for pantry goods, well, then start clearing out your pantry, start clearing out your basement, and make room for these sorts of things that you want to have a reasonable stock of. The other thing I encourage you to do is that if we do find ourselves kind of stuck in our homes during the winter again, get ahead of the curve and make your list of home projects that you want to do in your home now and get those supplies. If this does strike again, we're likely to be at home a lot. So why not be prepared to do home projects and get things off your to do list while you're home? If you invest the money into the supplies, you're more likely to do it to begin with. So make your home project list, get the supplies so that if you are at home more during the winter because of a pandemic, you might be more likely to get some things off your list at your home that are kind of bugging you. Now, I have a little bonus item for you guys, and it is regards to preventative maintenance. It may be a good idea to do another round of occupied inspections in September or October to see what repairs you want to address before winter comes and or possibly round 2 of the pandemic. So what small leaks are there in your units right now that are likely going to get bigger over time that you could address right now? What small repairs can you make that would maybe irritate a tenant who's home a lot more or would irritate a tenant if they had to wait 4 months to get fixed? Because for many states, one thing they also did was they limited our ability to go into occupied units. Here in Wisconsin, we were highly encouraged, like maybe even mandated without truly being a mandate, to stay out of occupied units. So do an inspection in September, October. See what kind of things could grow into bigger issues if they sat, get those fixed, and then also figure out there's little small repairs that you can do that might become irritating to a tenant if they were suddenly home for 6 or 8 weeks. The other thing with preventative maintenance, if you live in a climate that has winter, get furnace checkups done. Even if you don't normally do this, it's definitely something to consider this time around. Furnace checkups can indicate problems that are ticking time bombs that are likely to arise in the next few months. And remember that many HVAC companies either weren't going into homes when the pandemic hit, they were short staffed because people weren't coming into work because they were concerned, or they had people that were sick. So it's a good idea to get ahead of the curve, especially with this hitting in winter when we're required to be able to provide heat. Get your furnace checkups done. Make sure they are running well. See if there's any things that they can indicate are going to be problems and get those fixed ahead of the time. That way, you aren't scrambling to respond to an emergency when it's going to be harder to get HVAC guys anyway because it's winter. And then if it's also the middle of the pandemic, I mean, geez, that's going to be really hard to get them to respond. So think ahead of the game and get your furnace checkups done. This has been a lot of information, so really quick recap. In part one, we talked about increasing our reserves, so figuring out ways to bring in more income. If there weren't any ways you could bring in more income, then of course we can start talking about trimming our expenses, but that's a least efficient way to do it. Then in part one, we also talked about building our tenant rapport, building positive relationships with our tenants, and remembering that they are human beings that are actually living in the places that we are renting to them. They are not just dollar signs. In this episode, we've talked about creating a tenant resource packet. That's really quick, takes 30 to 35 minutes. Places they can get rental assistance, places they can get food pantry, items like that. Then we talked about instituting long-term lease renewal incentives. Then we talked about getting your own shit together because that's equally important. You don't want your brain waves being taken up by little small stuff like, oh my gosh, I have no toilet paper. Or, wow, I have no jeans. I'm going to be wearing pajamas if I ever leave the house now. Get your own shit together so that when everything else turns upside down, you're less likely to freak out and get obscenely stressed. And lastly, is a little bit of bonus items. We talked about doing occupied inspections again in September, October, and then also, if you live in a winter climate, getting your furnace checkups done. That's a lot of information, but so much of this is stuff you can start executing on right away. Start building your tenant rapport, start building your reserves, start creating your tenant resource packet. Start making changes right now so that when the next thing happens that affects our industry, you have this already in place and you're likely going to find the next wave of anything is smoother sailing than what it was the first time around. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you with a brand new episode next week.